Imagine spending your entire life desperately fighting this fundamental urge, only to realize that the very thing society and religion told you to run away from is, well, actually the exact starting point for spiritual enlightenment.
Right, it's quite the paradox.
It really is. Welcome to today's deep dive, everyone. Today is Sunday, August 9, 2026, and we're looking at a text that takes some of our most deeply ingrained assumptions about biology, society, and spirituality and just turns them completely inside out.
Yeah, it's an incredibly uncompromising piece of philosophy. We are examining a discourse originally delivered in September 1968 titled From Sex to Superconsciousness, From Repression to Emancipation.
A very bold title for 1968.
Oh, absolutely. And we should probably establish right away that our goal here is to act as impartial guides through this material. You know, this is a safe space to explore some radically different perspectives impartially. We aren't endorsing these viewpoints or like telling you what to believe.
Right, we're just here to map out the fascinating logic of the author's argument.
Exactly. We're just unpacking the ideas.
Okay, let's unpack this. The central thesis here is that humanity has spent millennia trying to suppress and feel ashamed of its own foundational energy. But to understand why we misunderstand our physical urges, the author argues we first have to understand how we misunderstand life itself.
Yeah, they set up this big epistemological critique.
Right, and they do it with this story about a fisherman that I found it so compelling. It goes like this. It's pitch black right before dawn. A fisherman goes down to the riverbank to wait for the sunrise.
Just waiting in the dark.
Exactly. And in the dark, his foot brushes against this small sack. He opens it, feels around, and finds it is full of stones. Or, well, what he thinks are stones.
Right, just ordinary river rocks.
Yeah, so just to pass the time, he lazily takes a stone, tosses it into the river, plop, takes another one, tosses it in. He does this for like an hour, absent-mindedly throwing these stones into the dark water.
Killing time before the real day begins.
Yes. Finally, the sun peaks over the horizon. The light hits the riverbank. The fisherman looks down at his hand, holding the very last stone from the sack. And in the daylight, he realizes it isn't a stone at all.
Oh, wow.
It is a priceless gem. He has just spent the entire morning unknowingly throwing an absolute fortune away.
It is a devastating realization. The fisherman is supposedly left sobbing, almost out of his mind with grief. But the author uses this narrative to point out something much larger.
Which is what?
That this is precisely how humanity operates on a macro scale. We treat existence like a sack of stones to be discarded while we wait for the sun to rise.
That's a heavy thought.
It is. And what's fascinating here is how the text aims a direct critique at traditional, historically dominant religious structures for perpetuating this exact mindset.
Yeah.
The author argues that classical theology has been largely death-oriented.
Meaning it focuses overwhelmingly on what happens after we die.
Precisely. The text specifically calls out concepts like heaven, or in Eastern traditions, moksha and nirvana.
And it's probably important to clarify how the author is using those terms here. They aren't defining moksha simply as spiritual liberation in the pure sense.
Right. They are critiquing the specific cultural application of it. The idea that life is just this cycle of suffering to be escaped, and that true peace only comes from extinguishing your earthly existence entirely.
Ah, I see. So by fixating entirely on an idealized afterlife, the text argues we've been essentially hypnotized into believing that our physical present existence is inherently flawed.
Or just useless. It frames human life as a miserable, purposeless phase that we just need to bypass as cleanly as possible. And if you believe life is just a miserable phase, a sack of stones, you don't look for beauty in it.
You definitely don't try to elevate it. That actually maps perfectly onto this brilliant metaphor the author uses about a railway waiting room.
Oh, I love this analogy.
Right. Think about how people behave in a waiting room at a train station. If you know you're leaving in 20 minutes, how do you treat that space? You don't care about it at all.
You're just passing through.
Exactly. People toss their trash on the seats, they scuff the floors, they don't bother to fix a broken chair because it's temporary. The author says this is exactly how we treat human life.
We view it as a temporary residence before the real experience begins after death.
Right, so we trash it. We neglect the present moment.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it asks you, the listener, to critically examine your own psychological landscape.
Yeah.
Like, how often do you defer your own happiness?
Oh, man, constantly.
Right. How often do you treat your current job or your current relationship or just your daily routine as a waiting room for some future state where you'll finally be settled or happy?
The elusive someday.
Exactly. The text suggests that if you cannot avail yourself of the life that is happening right now, you will never be prepared for whatever comes next. True religion, according to this discourse, shouldn't be about revering dead flowers. It should be the art of living.
But that forces a massive transition in our thinking. If life isn't just a waiting room, if it's actually a sack of gems, what is the fundamental engine driving it forward?
That's the big question.
Right. How does a passive waiting room become a living, striving ecosystem? The text traces this back to the most basic urge of existence. Before humanity, there were animals. Before animals, plants. Before plants, just an earth of rocks and oceans.
And the author argues that the earth was restless to produce plants. The plants were striving to produce animals.
It's framing evolution not just as some random biological mutation, but as a continuous, wholehearted process of creation. Everything in nature is directing its vital energy toward producing a new seed, a new and better self-form.
Life is this force continuously regenerating, attempting to transcend its current limitations. The text brings in philosophers like Friedrich Nietzsche and Sri Aurobindo to really ground this idea.
Oh, right, Nietzsche's concept of the Superman.
Exactly, the Übermensch. And Aurobindo conceptualized the supramental being. Both men recognize that humanity is not the finish line. We are a bridge.
We're in transition.
Yes. The idea is that life itself doesn't want to stagnate. It wants to evolve into a higher state of consciousness. And the raw fuel for that evolutionary leap is procreation.
Which brings us to the profound friction at the center of this text. We have this incredibly powerful, beautiful, universal engine of creation, the literal force that sustains all existence in humanity, has chosen to slap dirty labels on it.
We call it lust. We call it a sin.
Yeah, we treat the very energy that sustains life as a disparagement, something to be ashamed of and hidden away in the dark. And this creates a severe psychological crisis.
Which is where the law of reverse effect comes into play.
Yes. The author uses an analogy here that I found incredibly striking. Picture a novice cyclist learning to ride a bike for the very first time. They are on a massive, wide-open road. It's totally clear, except for one single, small stone way off to the shoulder.
A stone that anyone with a modicum of experience would just naturally bypass without a second thought.
Right, you wouldn't even notice it. But the novice rider is terrified of hitting it. Because they are so afraid of that one stone, they stare right at it. They become completely hypnotized by the fear of it.
The whole wide, safe road just vanishes from their awareness.
Exactly. And because their entire consciousness is fixated on the stone, their body naturally follows their gaze. Bam. They steer right into it. They collide with the exact thing they were desperately trying to avoid.
This perfectly illustrates what the early 20th century psychologist Émile Coué called the law of reverse effect. When the imagination and the will are in conflict, the imagination always wins.
The object of your fear becomes the absolute center of your consciousness.
Yes, and the text argues that humanity has been doing this with sex for 5,000 years. By trying to save ourselves from it, by preaching against it and building all these moral frameworks to suppress it, society has effectively made sex the absolute center of human consciousness.
There is a darkly comedic story in the text that highlights how absurd this gets. It's about a man who decided that eating was a sin.
Oh, this story is wild.
It is. He read that fasting was the path to spiritual deliverance and that consuming food was a violent, earthly act. So he starts aggressively suppressing his hunger. He fasts for days, but of course his biology asserts itself, and he eventually binges.
Right, and then he feels immense guilt, so he fasts again.
Exactly. It's a classic binge-restrict cycle driven entirely by ideological purity rather than biological reality. So finally, this man decides that society is just too tempting, and he runs away to a solitary cave in the jungle to isolate himself.
Could completely remove the temptation.
Yeah. His family is worried sick, naturally. His wife, hoping he is cured of this dangerous obsession with fasting, sends him a beautiful bouquet of get-well flowers. And what does he do?
This is the best part.
He writes back a note saying, "Thank you for the flowers. They were delicious." He literally ate the flowers.
It is an absurd image, but it highlights a profound psychological mechanism. When you declare war on a basic natural instinct, the instinct does not disappear. It just becomes perverted. It leaks out through the wrong pores.
Right. I mean, I see the humor in the flower story, but practically speaking, is the author actually suggesting that all of our modern hypersexuality, the constant presence of it in our art, advertising, movies, is essentially just psychological starvation?
That is exactly the argument.
Are we all just eating the flowers because we've been told we can't have a normal meal?
Yes. The author states we are starving for a natural integration of our vital energy. But because we repress it, It becomes an uncontrollable, pervasive fire, and the text offers a brilliant, if somewhat morbid, thought experiment to prove just how deeply this repression has wired our brains.
Okay, what is it?
Imagine you hear a plane crash nearby. You rush to the debris. You see a body in the wreckage. What is the very first question that flashes through your mind? In a split second, you do not ask, is this person a Hindu or a Muslim?
Right, you don't ask about their nationality or their profession.
No, your very first instinctual thought is it a man or a woman?
Oh, wow. That is deeply unsettling because it rings so true. We instantly categorize.
We do.
Mm.
And the author states that this immediate, unavoidable categorization is the direct result of repressed sexual energy. The repression makes the difference between genders the most unforgettable aspect of human memory.
That makes so much sense.
You might forget a person's name, their face, their age, but you will never forget if the person you sat next to on a train a year ago was a man or a woman. The Iron Curtain society has drawn between the sexes keeps that fire burning inside us constantly, just coloring every single interaction.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because if our obsession is just a symptom of repression, what are we actually craving when we seek out physical intimacy? The author says we are fundamentally misunderstanding our own desires.
We are.
The craving isn't actually for the physical body or the sensory pleasure at all.
It isn't. And the text points out a common psychological aftermath to back this up. After the physical act, a person often feels drained, empty, sometimes even experiencing a profound sense of melancholy or regret.
Which is weird if pleasure was the ultimate goal, right?
Exactly. If the physical gratification was the true, ultimate goal, achieving it should bring a sense of lasting, stable fulfillment. But it doesn't. And the author argues that this is because the deep, hidden craving is actually for something profoundly religious.
Okay, I have to stop you there because claiming that an instinctual biological drive to procreate is actually a subconscious desire for a religious experience sounds like a massive philosophical leap.
It sounds wild, I know.
Right. How does the author justify equating a neurological dopamine dump with spiritual enlightenment?
It is a bold leap, but the author justifies it by analyzing the exact mechanics of consciousness during the climax of the act. The text argues that during that peak moment, two specific psychological phenomena occur that perfectly mirror the deepest states of religious meditation.
What Eastern traditions refer to as Samadhi, right?
Exactly. Samadhi is a state of total ego death and profound meditative absorption. So the first phenomenon during climax is egolessness. For a split second, the I, your identity, your worries, your separateness from the universe, completely vanishes. You forget yourself entirely.
Okay, that tracks. And if the first element is the disappearance of the ego, the second must be about time, right? Because if the ego vanishes, then the perception of time, like the regrets of the past and the anxieties of the future, must disappear along with it.
You nailed it. The second phenomenon is timelessness. For that brief instant, there is only the eternal present. The text even quotes Jesus Christ here, noting the phrase, "There shall be time no longer."
Wow.
It is a moment where the linear progression of time is completely undone. The lightning of the divine shines briefly in the darkness of the physical act. So the attraction to sex is, at its core, the soul's unconscious desire to know its real unburdened self.
But the text points out a tragic flaw in this method. If we are using biology to achieve samadhi, it is incredibly costly. We accumulate all this vital energy just to experience a single fleeting second of timelessness, and then we fall right back down to earth, feeling totally depleted.
We exhaust ourselves for a glimpse.
Yeah, they use the detail of a certain African insect that can only perform the act once in its entire life. It gathers all its energy for that one moment of climax, and then it immediately dies.
It is a highly inefficient, exhausting way to seek the divine. The author uses an economic analogy here. If you want an item that costs $1,000 and someone shows you a way to acquire that exact same item for free, you would be foolish to keep paying the $1,000.
Obviously.
The argument is that if humanity could learn to attain that exact same ecstasy, that egolessness and timelessness through meditation or conscious awareness, the mind would automatically stop obsessing over the physical act. It would naturally pivot toward the more lasting, less costly spiritual fulfillment.
But wait, if indulging in the physical act leaves you drained, like that African insect, and repressing it causes a psychological plane crash where you're obsessed with the stone on the road,
Right.
aren't we just trapped?
It definitely feels like a catch-22.
Right. How did the ancients expect us to escape this binary of either exhausting indulgence or neurotic repression?
This raises an important question, and it is where the text introduces its most compelling architectural metaphor as the solution, The Khajuraho temple in India.
Oh, the Khajuraho temple is world famous. If you look at the outer walls of this temple, the entire circumference is covered in incredibly intricate, highly graphic sculptures depicting various sexual acts.
Is a visual overload of physical passion.
It really is. But when you walk inside the temple, into the inner sanctum, it is totally empty. There is absolute peace, quiet, and not even an idol of a deity.
The builders of that temple understood the psychological mechanism of human desire perfectly. Lust and passion exist on the circumference of life. Traditional repressive religion tells us to shut our eyes to that circumference and try to blindly barge into the center.
Just ignore the outside and push your way in.
Right. But if you run into a dark room with your eyes closed, you won't see anything. You cannot reach the divine center through willful ignorance.
So the temple forces you to confront the circumference first.
Exactly. Ancient aspirants used this as a meditation center. They were instructed to sit outside and meditate on the outer walls. The mechanism here is crucial. You don't just glance at the sculptures, you study them.
You really process them.
Yes, you process the physical acts completely, without shame, fear, or moral judgment. By fully confronting the reality of the urges, the novelty wears off. The dopamine-driven obsession neutralizes.
Ah, so it loses its power over you.
Only when their minds were no longer magnetically drawn to the outer walls out of repressed curiosity or taboo were they allowed to step inside. They achieved transcendence through profound knowledge, not through hiding.
So what does this all mean for us? You have to know the starting point before you can take the journey, which fundamentally changes how we view the concept of brahmacharya.
A very misunderstood concept.
Yeah, historically that term is translated simply as celibacy or abstaining from sex entirely. But the author frames it not as the enemy of sex, but as its ultimate evolution.
Think about coal and diamonds. We all know that a diamond and a piece of coal are mathematically, chemically, the exact same material carbon. The only difference is time, pressure, and transformation. There is no enmity between the coal and the diamond.
They're the same thing.
Exactly. The author applies that exact same thermodynamic logic to human biology. Sex energy is the raw coal. Brahmacharya, which the author translates as communion with God or spiritual enlightenment, is the diamond.
If you declare a moral war on the coal and try to destroy it, you will never, ever get a diamond. You have to accept the raw energy, understand it, and consciously direct it.
You have to transform it.
But how do we practically do that as a society? The text offers some societal solutions that, frankly, must have been incredibly controversial in 1968 and probably still are today. It argues that covering the body up completely is precisely what creates the maddening allure in the first place.
What's fascinating here is that the author relies on Bertrand Russell's observations of the Victorian era to prove this. Back then, women's dresses swept the floor. If a Victorian man even caught a fleeting glimpse of a woman's bare ankle, he would be thrown into a passionate frenzy.
Just from an ankle.
Right. The point is that concealment breeds curiosity and fetishization. The mystery itself is what drives the obsession.
Because of that mechanism, the text actually advocates for letting children play nude together at home for as long as possible. The logic is that by completely demystifying the human body from a young age, they become so familiar with it that no perverted, mysterious attraction can take root later in life.
It takes the taboo completely out of the equation.
Exactly. They won't need to sneak around to figure out what's hidden, because nothing was ever hidden from them in the first place.
It is a radical, practical application of their core philosophy. Knowledge is transcendence. By removing the mystery and the societal taboo, you neutralize the obsession. The author makes a sharp distinction here. Sex is a natural biological function, but sexuality, the obsessive, pervasive, neurotic thought pattern we see dominating society, is actually the artificial product of anti-sex teachings.
Okay, to summarize this incredibly dense and provocative journey we've been on today, life is not a waiting room where we scuff the floors while waiting for death. It is a sack of gems.
A beautiful way to look at it.
And the driving force of this life is an incredibly powerful natural energy that is constantly trying to evolve us upward.
But because we have been conditioned to fear and repress that very energy, we have fallen victim to the law of reverse effect. We've crashed our bicycles right into the one stone on the road.
We really have.
We have made the physical act the center of our world, completely missing the fact that our biological craving is actually a misdirected, inefficient hunger for spiritual ego death, for timelessness.
We are taking the raw coal of our existence and hoarding it in the dark instead of letting it transform into a diamond. I want you, the listener, to really think about this today. Look at your own life. Where are the stones in your road?
Where are you applying the law of reverse effect?
Exactly. What are you obsessing over simply because you are spending so much of your mental bandwidth trying to suppress it?
It is a vital exercise in self-awareness. It requires recognizing the circumference of your own Khajuraho temple before you can ever hope to step inside.
And I want to leave you with one final lingering thought. This text from 1968 suggests that our most profane physical obsession is actually a gateway to the sacred because it provides a brief biological glimpse of timelessness and egolessness.
Right.
If we take that logic and apply it to our modern hyperdigital world today, a world full of doom scrolling, virtual reality, and constant algorithmic stimulation, what other behaviors do we have?
That's a great question.
What are the things we consider our most shameful modern distractions or addictions? Could it be that our endless scrolling and constant need for digital distraction is actually just our subconscious mind desperately starving for a moment of true silence, connection, and ego death? Are we still just sitting in the dark, throwing gems into the river, waiting for the sun to rise? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep questioning the stones in your own sack. Take care.